Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live stream Fisher Valley podcast. And today I'm joined by Professor James H. Charlesworth, and we're going to be talking about his work titled The Dead Sea Scrolls, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek texts with English translations, the Thanksgiving hymns, and related documents. So that's the text we're going to be talking about today. So welcome back to the show, James Charlesworth.
Well, Jacob, I think you're doing a wonderful job sharing in an engaging way with a large group the new research that is bringing sharp light upon the origins of Judaism, Christianity, and especially the spiritual life of Jesus.
So can you tell the audience about the Thanksgiving hymns? What is the text about?
Can you see this book?
Yes.
It's a very heavy book, and it has over 734 pages. The title of it is the Thanksgiving Hymns. Thanksgiving Hymns. I want to talk to you about those. We didn't know about them when World War II ended or in the early 40s. But the Qumran caves, that is near the Dead Sea, to a place that is called Qumran, there are caves. And in the days and years before the burning of Jerusalem in September 70, the Romans were coming southward on the west side of the Jordan River. And if I may say so, what we call the Einsteins of antiquity were living at Qumran. That is just a little south of Jericho and south of the road that leads up to Jerusalem. When they saw the Romans coming, these men had thousands of manuscripts, and in the caves is where they kept them. Cave 1 is where they hid some as they fled to Jerusalem, and in Cave 1 they put their most valuable, in terms of spiritual truths, copies of their leather scrolls. Cave 4, we number them. Cave 1 we just referred to. That was the first one found by the Bedouin. In Cave 4, 6 copies of the Hodiot were found and 2 copies of the Hodiot in Cave 1. Now, I've used the word Hodiot. It is a Hebrew word. Now we speak to English. It's Thanksgiving hymns. 8 copies were placed in these caves. Clearly, I have no doubt these are the great treasures of antiquity. We have the Psalms of David, and they were written long before the time of Jesus and Paul and the Gospels. I call this one, the Gospel or the Thanksgiving hymns, the diamond in the Qumran mines. It's like Qumran is giving us mines of treasures, and the diamond in it is the Thanksgiving hymns.
Do we know when the text was written?
The text was written by many people from the latter part of the 2nd century BC or BCE to the middle of the 1st century BCE, or that's say 150 to 50 BCE, about 100 years. Now, why do we call it the Thanksgiving hymns? Because each major hymn begins with, I thank you, O Lord, because. Now that's Odaka Adonai Ki. The Hebrew is Odaka Adonai Ki. I thank you, O Lord, because. That's a big wow. Why? Well, it's because the sons of Aaron had been in charge of the temple from the time of David and even before until, let's say, 150. We don't have, first of all, we don't have a calendar like that. Secondly, we don't have them saying we left on Friday, such and such. We're estimating that they left sometime around the middle of the latter part of the 1st century BC. Now, why is that? They were the sons of Aaron and another group, the ones that we know are the Maccabees or the Hasmoneans. We know that from Hanukkah. The Maccabean were priests, but they were not of the Aaronite line. And that's why you have the passage in our Bible that the high priest will be chosen until a worthy one, a traditional one, shall arise. Now, that means the sons of Aaron had been chased away. They went into the wilderness, and they lived at a place we call Qumran. Now, none of us know what that means. There's lots of guesses. Now, let us think about the Hodeo, the Thanksgiving hymns. They were found in the early 1947. We don't know when, because obviously the Bedouin shepherds found 2 copies in Cave 1, and one of them is only in tiny fragments. Eventually, scholars found other copies in Cave 4. Hebrew is the original language. Now, how many poems or hymns are we talking about? 35. Now, that figure contrasts with the 150 in the Hebrew Bible, or the 156 Psalms of David we finally know about today. But the best preserved scroll is 1, Cave 1, Q, Qumran, H, Hodeot, A, 1QHA. That's how we number the scrolls. These hymns were written by priests. They had been expelled from serving in the temple, as I said, shortly before 100 BCE. Now, what I want to do is get today, you and those who are listening, realize that these are the Einsteins of antiquity. They are incredibly brilliant. And for anybody that wants to grow spiritually and grow closer to God, and those who are close to God, they should read these and study them. Let me give you an example. In one of them, we read this: "For with you, O God, there is light." Now, when you feel you're in darkness, think about that. And it continues, "And you, O God, uncovered the ear of dust." Boy, we could spend months on that. And you uncovered. Amazing. God is still involved with his faithful ones, and he uncovers our ear, which means that we have become deaf. We're deaf in this world. We think that the great people like Caesar, and I don't want to mention other names because they would upset my stomach, but so many of the powerful leaders, they are not good. We know that. Well, think what's going on just to the east of us. Oh, the Israelis are suffering so much from evil men. What they're doing, I will never tell you, because you wouldn't be able to really understand it. You, oh God, uncovered our ears. They have been covered with dust. Now, that is from hymn 23, 4-5. Now, I want to read you from some sections that I pulled out for you. Here is another section that shows you the absolute brilliant minds. We'll talk in a moment who wrote them. Listen to this one, right from the Thanksgiving hymns. "And I walk continuously in unfathomable unrightness, so that I know that where exists hope for him whom you fashioned from dust, for the eternal assembly. I'll read it again. I walk continuously in unfathomable uprightness, so that I know that there exists hope for him or her whom you fashioned from dust for the eternal assembly. That is a wonderful hope, and most of us are finding it difficult to find hope these days. And here's another passage I want to read to you. These are my translations. And I know that there is hope in your loving kindness and expectation in the abundance of your power, because no one is justified in your judgments and no one wins your lawsuit. Now, we win in the lawsuit because God steps in and takes care of us, but we cannot justify ourselves. And you think, oh my gosh, I read that in Paul. Oh my gosh, I read that in Jesus. Oh my gosh, I read that in the Gospel of John. Oh my goodness, I'm beginning to see the soil from which the plant called Christianity grew. And that becomes very exciting for all of us who are Jews or Christians. Now, I want to move on. I've got sections I've tried to mark in this massive 700-page book. Interpreting, this is what I've written, but I think I can read it better than come up with it again. Interpreting the Thanksgiving hymns demands a vast knowledge of the concepts in all the scrolls, composed or definitively edited at Qumran. Professor Licht rightly contended that the ruins in Qumran represent a Jewish establishment with installations that could be identified as a mikveh, a dining room, and a scrollery. The mikveh is where you become spiritually cleansed. You cannot enter the temple until you've entered a mikveh. So we have a kind of insight that the Essenes living in this area believed that their community was a temple. Why do we know that? I just read it to you. You need to enter a mikveh first. You can't enter the Jerusalem temple without entering a mikveh. And secondly, the Holy Spirit was a creation by the Essenes. We find the Holy Spirit of God in the Hebrew Bible and in our Old Testament, but you don't find the Holy Spirit, an independent, separate being, and that is created by the Essenes. And they claim that when they were thrown out of the temple, wandered down the hills, down the dry riverbeds, to a ruin left from the Iron Age, 500, 600, 700 years before, they rebuilt it and they established a community there. Why am I telling you this? They felt that the Holy Spirit had left Jerusalem and was living in their community. This is absolutely essential for understanding the height of Judaism, from which sprang Jesus, and from which sprang Jesus' followers, and from which sprang Christianity. And we can feel that Spirit, the Holy Spirit, in our services and in our worship. Now, the Hodiot, the Thanksgiving hymns, it's about 35 poems or hymns. Maybe the best preserves of the scrolls, these are big scrolls. Maybe 2 hymns were lost at the beginning. Now, as I've said, these were written by priests who had been expelled from the Holy of Holies and the temple. Now, when was the text composed? You asked me that.
Yeah.
It's a collection from about 100 BC to, let's say, 50 CE. Now, you ask who wrote them. I want to read you from pages. Well, there's a long section here in my book about autobiographical references. Well, it took me 60 years to do this book. And if I showed you a chart, you'd get an idea.
Oh, wow.
That is in your copy on pages. It starts on 16 and goes on and on. But these are just what I've out as the autobiographical references. Now, we are focusing on who composed these hymns. Our first point would be, did the righteous teacher, that is an anonymous person, an Aaronite, a son of Aaron, did he compose any of the text? In the early going, Professor Sukenik, who bought the scroll and published it within a year, and Dupont-Sommer, the top biblical scholar in Paris, they both concluded that all the hymns were written by the righteous teacher. Today, we're much more critical. We've learned about the righteous teacher. It's not the first 5 years. It's really the first 50 years or more. We can say maybe 10, maybe more. We don't know. They're not autographed. How do we discern? I'll give you an idea. The author often uses the first person pronoun, okay? I thank you. I thank you. So then we begin to get to who is the I. This gets into history and sociology. And like the Gospels, when we study the Hodia, we learn how history is taking shape within theology. Now, too many people say, history and theology are two opposites. History is a science, theology is make-believe. Not in the academy. The most advanced scientific work is done in theology. You have to know 12 languages. You have to know geography. You have to know archaeology. You have to have dug. But of course, hardly anybody does that. For 50 and 60 years, I've been living intermittently. You tried to get me 2 weeks ago, and I was in Israel working. Now, you asked me a question. Let's get that taken care of. You asked me, what is the fountain of life? That's the mysterious fountain, and it's the righteous teacher. And I'll prove that to you in just a moment, because we want to get through to one of the most important autobiographical comments in history. So let's admit the Thanksgiving hymns were written and completed about a century before Jesus. Many of them were written by many people, and we're looking at the righteous teacher, and after him we have Hillel, and after him we have Jesus. These are three exceptional geniuses that in different ways have clarified our spiritual language. Now, I want to turn with you, if you turn to page 163, I already have it tagged. I want to go through this, and you can interrupt me at any time, but I'm going to try to prove to you that after 60 years of research, I and most scholars are absolutely convinced that the righteous teacher, now remember, anonymity is a key at Qumran. We don't know who he is. No one at Qumran was ever mentioned, which is a very unique point. We could get into that in some of the anonymous dimensions in the New Testament, but that's another matter. It gets kind of deep at this point. But the righteous teacher he chose to be anonymous. Obviously, his followers knew who he was. But you take, for example, Jesus. If we didn't know Jesus from Nazareth, you would get words like, oh, teacher, oh, rabbi, oh, Lord, and you would not know his name. Fortunately, in the New Testament, Jesus is so much more important in the New Testament than anybody who has ever lived. But I don't have to convince anybody of that. People certainly know that, especially Jews and Christians. Now we're going to look at column 16. And we'll first start with line 17, because that's a key. Now, he's writing this. I have to prove that to you. And he writes this, "But you, O my God, you put into my mouth that which is like the early rain for all plantings, and it became the pond of living water." Okay, you don't have 8 hours, so I'll try to be as succinct as possible. Who is, oh my God? That is the Jewish and Christian God, the creator of all. Even this expanding universe, there's only one creator. And boy, does that get interesting to me, because the advanced astrophysicists are saying, our God is too small. Look at this. And there may not only be, we used to think there was one solar system, then one galaxy, then two galaxies. Now we're talking about millions and millions and millions of galaxies. What are we talking about? This is what the new telescopes are showing us. Galaxy upon galaxy, and maybe they're entrances into another universe. So don't feel small. If we did the same thing with biology, with electronic microscopes, we would go down to the atom, which was not tome divisible. It was considered 100 years ago, 150 years ago, the indivisible particle, the final little bit of reality or life. But now we have prosoneutrons and neutrons, and then we have wave theory. So it may be that we can go as far out as conceivable and as far deep as conceivable. So I would say the human is no longer insignificant. It's between two incomprehensible realities. Now, I know I'm pushing the minds of people, so let's get back to line 17. But you, oh my God, it is my God, and my personal God, the one I know, the one who talks to me, the one who makes his will known to me. See how you get an idea? But oh my God, you put into my mouth that which is like the early rain. Now, I wrote a book on that. The early rain. It's been coming down, and it was there when I was in Jerusalem, in Israel. The early rain comes down in little tiny droplets. Quiet. It hits the earth. The later rain comes like a flood. It washes seeds away. So this author is saying it's like the early rain, the fresh rain that seeps in and brings. Now, let me give you an idea. I was going to go on, but you're so smart, I can figure it. I went down into the Negev. That's the desert in the southern parts of Israel. I guess it was 40 years ago. And we wanted to see the desert bloom. You're thinking about Isaiah. Okay, the desert will bloom. The desert is there. And as far as you can see, there was only sand. The next day, the gentle rain came down. Now, it's gentle rain. The early rain is gentle. And before you knew it, for 100 miles, or as far as you could see, none of us can see 100 miles. As far as you could see, there were flowers. The desert shall bloom. The early rain for all the plantings, and it becomes the pond of living water. Now, that word, living water, it develops in these scrolls. It means water that's salvific, water that gives you eternal life. And you think, oh, I remember that in Gospel of John. You got it. And that's why so many people think the author of the Gospel of John could be an Essene, one of these people, or was one who lived with them and was very much influenced and knew the scrolls, knew this scroll. Now let's go back to the beginning of the column so we can get an idea. Now, I've tried to convince you this was written by the righteous teacher. And now, of course, no one signs I wrote this. No one says I, the righteous teacher, wrote this. But I'm going to try to show you that there's only one conclusion. If you really think objectively and openly, there's only one probability. No one works with certainty anymore. It is probable that the earth is not the only place where there's life like we have on this earth. Probable. And there are a lot of very wise people that think we're about to receive an amazing revelation of life from another part of our universe. I don't want to get into that, but let me read this to you. This is the Thanksgiving hymn composed by the righteous teacher, beginning with column 16, line 5. Oh, the Kai Adonai Nethatani. Oh, excuse me. I forgot. Some of your readers don't know Hebrew. I'll get back to the English. I thank you, O Lord, because you place me. All right, this is the author. You place me as the source of streams in a dry land. He looks at Judaism and it's a dry land. But God has chosen him and placed me as the source of streams. Now, if there are streams in the dry land is not going to be dry. And as the gushing pond of water in an arid land, he is announcing, because God has put streams of water in him and a gushing pond, that the arid and dry land will cease. And it continues, and as the irrigator of the garden. Now, it took me about a decade to study that word, and that's what it means. He's declaring to be the irrigator of the water. It took a while because it first appeared as the servant who brings the water in a cup to the king. So you see, bringing water to the king evolves over time, and it is eventually the irrigator of the eternal garden. Aha, now you catch it. You see, Gan Eden. Eden is being recreated. There's no longer dry land. There's no longer parched land. A new Eden is appearing. And as a field of planting of cypress and elm with cedar together for your glory. Now, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out who these are. Each one of them is an individual that is like a cypress tree, like an elm tree, like a cedar tree, and they're together. And that's a pun, yachad. They are together for God's glory. Now, the community is called a yachad. So you see, he's using double entendre to bring out his message. The trees of life are beside a mysterious fountain. Now, he's going to be talking about an evil man, the wicked priest, and himself, the righteous teacher. I don't think he gave himself that name, but who gave it to him? Well, remember when we ask a lot of questions about history, there'll be many that open our eyes to thinking, but not to answering. These trees are the trees of life, and they're beside a mysterious fountain, and they're concealed among all the trees of water. So there are lots of trees in the forest. The trees of water are the bad trees, and the trees of life are the good trees. Now, that's very confusing because he's already told how important water is. But actually, these trees of water can't get water. It gets very complicated. He is a genius, and in many ways, I think he doesn't want anybody to understand him unless they've been trained by his students. So that's what I'm trying to help you to see. Don't think this is easy, and don't think I figured it out in a year or a decade. And these trees of life, they are producing a shoot for an eternal planting by taking root before they blossom. They go down before they go up. so that when they go up, they can have a blossom. And their roots they send out to a brook, a stream, and its stem is open to the living water. So he's basically saying, my trees of life are they're suffering from the trees of water in the temple. They are the sons of Aaron. They are the chosen ones. But these other people are horrible. In fact, they are so horrible that one of their descendants crucified hundreds of men. And as they were crucifying these other men, these Pharisees, this was a Jew doing it, he was copulating with women. Pretty disgusting. This is indeed evil people. And the living water will become an eternal spring. For in the shoot of its leaves, all the beasts of the field will gaze, and its stem is trampled on by all who pass over. See, all who pass over the way, his followers are going to suffer. Now, when we study the life of the righteous teacher, we know that on the Day of Atonement, he has a different calendar. So the wicked priest can leave Jerusalem when the righteous teacher cannot move, because it's the Day of Atonement in which you fast, in which you pray, which you don't travel. And our intense study of the righteous teacher suggests that his arm was twisted and he could no longer use it. Maybe his legs were broken. Why? To make sure that the righteous teacher, who had been once the high priest, could never serve again because he was a broken body. You see, the more you dig, the more you think, oh my gosh. Now let's not forget those who pass on the way. The way throughout history is a very deep concept. Lao Tzu, the great Chinese thinker living before the righteous teacher, said, the way that is weighed is not the way. Listen to that. The way that everybody says is the way is not the way. The way that is weighed is not the way. Then we jump into Judaism, and the righteous teacher, the irrigator of the garden, says those who have wandered from the way. And then you have the New Testament. I am the way, the truth, and the light. Jesus and his followers use these concepts. Now, I think you can understand that many people think the Dead Sea Scrolls really have opened our eyes to a dimension of Christianity that we never knew existed. Now, I'll let you talk a little bit. We could go deeper, but I think I've made the point. The righteous teacher is an anonymous genius. He of the sons of Aaron that go back to Moses, the time of Moses. Moses' brother was Aaron. The Aaronites were in charge of all religious matters. When Solomon built the temple around 1000, somewhere around there, we can't, you can't be more precise than that. You want 950, that's okay. Around that time, Solomon built the temple, and the sons of Aaron took the ark in. Well, David took the ark in and sang and danced. And people say we shouldn't dance. Well, then why did David dance? We shouldn't dance. Well, why did they dance in the temple? Well, you shouldn't dance. Well, why did Mary, according to the Gospel of Mary, which is very close to the date of the Gospel of John, why was she allowed to dance? Why were virgins dancing? When you dance in the temple, your body is becoming the musical instrument by which you sing the praises of God. Now, I was trying to be quiet so that you can ask questions. I know this has been like a tsunami of insights and reflections, but I'm sure you have follow up and other ideas that I'd be very happy to respond to.
Well, before I get to my questions, we do have a couple from the audience. I'm going to start with this super chat. But on this particular question I'm seeing here, I think it's off topic. JC, thank you for your super chat. Any insight on saffron, Azuperu, the Star of David, and 6 petaled crocus rosettas on the talpiot ossuaries of Yeshua, Bar, Joseph, and Caiaphas? JC, I just want to warn you that we're not talking about Jesus primarily on this live stream. We're focusing more on the Thanksgiving hymns. James Charlesworth, do you want to answer this question, or do you want to pass it?
Clearly, make it clear, and I'll try to be clear in my response.
The question is, any insight on saffron, Azuperu, the Star of David, and 6 petaled crocus rosettas on the talpiot ossuaries of Yeshua, Bar, Joseph, and Caiaphas?
What I would urge him to do is look at my book on the Talpiot tomb, where we go into that in great length and the scholars think about it. Caiaphas' tomb is another matter. I have no doubt is the ossuary of Caiaphas. So he's asking key questions, and that would be my way of responding now.
Also, I'll add that James Charlesworth and I have done a video on the Talpiot tomb before, so you can watch that video as well.
Very good, Jacob.
Here's the next question that I think is on topic this time. Dan Smith, thank you for your question. Is it possible that the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in an area where incomplete, incorrect, error written scrolls were placed for disposal and hidden away as not to be assessed anymore?
That is a Geniza, and the Qumran scrolls are not from a Geniza. Even a Geniza is where you place scrolls that are perfect, but they're getting too worn out. The Cairo Geniza is one of those, and when I was living in St. Catherine's Monastery, we found another one, and if you look under my name, you'll see a book I did about the St. Catherine Monastery manuscripts found in a Geniza in a storeroom. Do you need more on that?
Nope, I think you answered that question. So when you say that, when you go through the Thanksgiving hymns, and you can distinguish between that which was most likely written by the righteous teacher from those that were not written by him. And as you pointed out earlier, the righteous teacher doesn't point it out that he is the righteous teacher writing these texts. But is it the way that he describes certain individuals, like the wicked priest that we just talked about? Is that one of the clues of telling that it's the righteous teacher writing?
Let me lead you through 60 years of research. At the beginning, Sukenik and Dupont-Sommer, these are some of the top scholars in the world. And many people who were specialists in America believed or concluded that all of the hymns in the Hodayot, the Thanksgiving hymns, were composed by the righteous teacher. And then intensive work was done in Germany, and began to realize that many of these could not have been written by the righteous teacher. So that criteria were developed, and the criteria is pretty brought down to one simple focus. Does the life of the righteous teacher appear in any way clearly in this poem? Now, the poem I read to you, he is clearly a powerful person. He declares that God has placed him as the overflowing fountain. He's the overflowing fountain. That has to be the righteous teacher. So it's and of course, you don't have a long list of hymns that were probably composed by him. No one says certain, but remember, there are many hymns he could have written, but his personality is not in the top. You take the Psalms of David. Which ones of them reflect the life of David? I would say, well, it's getting difficult there. Maybe 24, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. David was a shepherd. And it looks like this may go back, maybe some editing, but it may go back to David. But I'm not getting into the Davidic Psalter because that gets so complicated. We can date some of them by allusions to history that they're 400 years after David, but they were called Psalms of David because he was the poet laureate, and often le David, which is what is the beginning of the Hebrew of a Psalm of David. It is in honor of David, not. You have the Lameth Actoris, which means the author David, but you have the same Lameth, the the L. It could be by David or in honor of David. Now we're getting back to the righteous teacher. There are many poems that I think, that could have been written by him, but it's not autobiographical. And so we are more concerned to find ones clearly written by him, but that doesn't mean the others could not have been written by him. I hope that brings a sharp focus on our work. Our work is the most exciting thing I could ever want to do. I started this in 1958, and I work every day now from the time I get up, and I barely eat, and I go to the gym to try to get some exercise, but I just working on this material all the time, and I'm now writing a biography of Jesus. Why? Because there's a real need for a biography of Jesus that is informed by everything we're learning: archaeology, economics, Dead Sea Scrolls, the editing of the scrolls. Now, the person who asked me, could none of the Qumran caves have a geniza for worn-out scrolls? A worn-out scroll is not a scroll that's not accurate. I like the question very much because if I get into the mind of the people living at Qumran, they would say, no, that is not the copy we like. So we would put it not to be read. Remember, there are 12 different copies of the Psalms of David, and every scroll we get has corrections. So you have the copyist errors, then you have the person that reads them and changes things, and then you have, yes, there are some scrolls that if we had time, I would bring them out and we'd look at those, but I'm convinced that these were no longer the scrolls they wanted to read. And then one of them is a biblical scroll.
Can you tell us about who the prince of the Elim are?
Well, the Elim are the angels, and the prince of the Elim, where do you find that term?
It's in page 181.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is
It's page 181?
Yeah, it's in column 18.
Thank you.
In the 10th line.
181. Okay, what line?
10.
I have to change my glasses. Behold, you are the prince of the Elim. I have a note that is the divine beings. Elim are the divine beings. Behold, you are the prince of the Elim and the king of the glorious ones, and lord to every spirit and ruler over every creature. It must be, that's a really wonderful question. I can't off the top of my head. It has to be, behold, you are prince of the Elim. The Elim are the angels. So the prince of the Elim could be Michael. You have conflation here mixing God with the angels. If the angels are teaching, then that means God is teaching. And then it says, and what then is Adam? This is in 5. He is only dirt. Okay, that didn't help. And then he says, but I am dust and ashes. What can I ponder without your desiring it? And what can I think about? So it's God that desires it. Are you there? Mine went blank.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. He's really saying, how can I be strengthened without allowing me to stand? God allows him to stand. And how can I gain insight without you having fashioned it for me? This reminds me of Einstein. They said, what is the formula you use to get these great breakthroughs like energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, E equals mc squared? He got everybody upset in mathematics. He said, it was revealed to me. I would have to say that when I look back, we can go back 3,000 years. Every great thinker says, no, I didn't think this up. It was given to me. You're asking great questions. Remember, great questions will always be superior to great answers. But let's look at the whole line. Behold, you are the prince of the Elim. I think that could be Michael or God, and that would be, Michael would be representing God, and the king of the glorious ones. That looks very much like different gods, and Lord to every spirit and ruler over every creature. Now, when this text was written, you have henotheism and monotheism. Monotheism is the belief in one God and the denial of any other God existing. Henotheism is worship of one God, dedication to one God, but acknowledging there could be other gods. That would be small g. There is one God, and there's maybe other gods. Eventually, Judaism and Christianity left henotheism and are thoroughly monotheistic. And that is what you have in Deuteronomy, the Great Confession. Behold, the Lord our God is one Lord, which means Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Echad, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, hear or obey, O Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, the Lord our God, Adonai Echad, is one and only Lord. There is only, and that was taken, I don't know how it originally meant. By the time of Jesus, it's an absolute monotheistic confession, and all Jews take it that way today. They pray that Shema Yisrael. I thank you, O Lord. I praise you because you are the only God. Now, let's just pause for a moment, because I bet you most people listening believe there is a God. Well, a lot of people don't understand that they haven't experienced God. Well, that's their fault. You can sit in a room for hours, days, months, and years and never turn on the stereo. You can sit there and say, I don't hear any music. Or you can walk over and turn on the stereo and sit down and think, I hear beautiful music. When have you got on your knees and prayed for days? I'm listening. What can I hear from you? And remember, the accounts, Elijah said, after he was urging God, who am I? I'm just a failure. And then there was a thunder, but God wasn't in the thunder. There was an earthquake, but he wasn't in the earthquake. Then there was a still, small voice. We have to move very quickly into the future and reflect upon our past. Often the most articulate words are those that we do not hear, but we can feel. And I wrote an article on that. It's called The Linguistics of the Eye. The eye is the most powerful speaker, and that's why people are afraid to look us in the eye. They might tell us something they couldn't hold back. I know we're getting deep, but that's what I want to do, because people are turning into you, Jacob. They're hungry. There's people out there hungry. That they have not been telling things that you want them to hear, and I want them to hear. It's your turn again. I had to just do that. I had to share something very special.
So in the same column in line 30, it talks about the son of Adam.
What column? Where are you?
Do we know which son of Adam is being
Where are you? Where are you?
It's in page 185.
I'm there. Okay. And thus to the son of Adam, something is missing, right? It's lost.
Yeah.
And I'm saying it really means those who belong to Adam. It's not an individual.
And what kind of inheritance are they supposed to expect?
Well, Adam is here a symbol of all humanity, the origin of all of us. And you enlarged his inheritance to the knowledge of your truth. Now, his inheritance would be the blessed future and paradise. So where you see is he will be brought into we have worms have eaten holes in this scroll. What did it say? He will be brought into paradise? But that doesn't make sense, because the soul of your servant detests wealth and unjust gain. That makes, obviously here we're talking about the people who are pompous because they have a lot of money. But the good one does not desire money. Then he says, my heart rejoices in your covenant, and your truth delights my soul. So the author is working with a dualism. There are those who delight luxuries, but for him, he delights in God's covenant, and the truth of God delights his soul. Now, I think what you need to see, he says, and I blossom like a lily, and my heart was open to the eternal source. And my support lay in shelter from on high, and he strengthened my soul so it can understand misfortune. Isn't that wonderful? That God has strengthened our soul so we can understand misfortune. God doesn't take away misfortune or problems in life. He helps us to see beyond them, because all these texts are telling us this life is not the end of all life.
Can you tell us who the sons of light and the sons of darkness are? Because I know the text.
Yes, this is a concept developed among the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it shapes the New Testament. There are two, gosh, I could spend 3 hours on this. I can't do that. There are two types of people, and that's how they were created according to Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. You're either created a son of darkness, and you will suffer at the end of life. You'll have maybe a wonderful life with lots of luxuries and all the things that you need, but then you'll end up dying and suffering and being punished. You will go to hell, if you will, and eventually you'll be annihilated. That's the sons of darkness. In contrast are the sons of light. The sons of light walk in the way of light and can see the path. They shall have a glorious life, maybe not now, but eventually. And when they die, they shall have eternal glory and unending life with God. Now you say, okay, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. There are sons of light and sons of darkness. I know people who are dark, bad people who do good things. You would say Hitler is as bad as it gets, but he gave us the Volkswagen, the people's wagon. No one could afford the Mercedes, and he gave us the Autobahn free, and anybody could drive on it. But you see, a bad man can do some things that are good. How does this explain? Aha! Now, we have a text, few people know about it, and let me read it to you from memory. There are two wells. One is the well of light, and one is the well of darkness. When each person is being created, someone, maybe God, someone else, maybe Michael, it doesn't say, there are 9 portions in each human. That's the perfect number. Because if you had 8, that would mean the person had equal amounts of light and darkness. If you had 5, it gets too close. If you had 4, that's equal. If you have 1, that's not possible. If you have 2, that's equal. So you need 9. Okay. When they create a son of darkness, they make 8 portions of darkness and 1 of light, so that the most evil man or woman can at times do the inconceivable, be good. And we see this all the time. We see it from Hamas. I think they're the most evil people on the earth, but they let a little girl go free. Well, that doesn't mean they're good people, but the Qumran anthropology explains it. Now the good person, the Pope, anybody you can think of, he has 9 portions, but 8 of them are light. Now, you take Jesus, it's going to upset some people. But according to some scholars, Jesus was not so nice to the Syrophoenician woman. She has to tell him, even those of us who are dogs, we can crawl under the table and get us crumb. Please, Jesus. So I don't think Jesus, he was being typically Jewish then, but I think he's the most perfect man who ever lived. But I'm allowing him to have a little bit of time when he's not perfect. And the account is that. Then you can think about many other people who are absolutely marvelous. And you'll hear people say, how can such a wonderful person do something like that? And now you know everybody, according to Qumran anthropology, has 9 portions. Even the most wonderful person has 1 spot of darkness. And even the most evil person has 1 portion of light. That to me is very, at Qumran they say, no, we're not speculating. The angels are with us, and we're learning, and we're dedicating our lives to this revelation. Qumran was a community that believed they were getting revelations. Jesus' community was a community they believed they were getting revelations. And many Essenes did follow Jesus' group. And many of the sayings of Jesus make best sense when we know he was not an Essene, as some people said. No. But probably according to our archaeological work, he had the Last Supper in an Essene area of Jerusalem. But you see, we're getting into things that I'm certain about, but I can't demonstrate it. But maybe they can go and read some of the things that have been written. How are we doing, Jacob?
I think we're doing pretty good. The text also discusses combating the evil forces of Belial and making desolate the palace of the wicked ones. What does this mean?
Well, Belial is another name for Satan. The author of the Qumran Scrolls believed that we're coming to a horrible cosmic war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, between the angel of truth and Belial, or Satan. Satan does appear in the scrolls. For many decades, we didn't think it did. Satan, as you know from the New Testament and the Old Testament, is the devil. Now, I want to tell you, Jacob, one of the things we've made a mistake about is that we said, no, there's no devil. And then you think, well, our traditions say there is. Our Bible says there is. The Qumran Scrolls prove there is. The New Testament argues there is. Maybe we ought to go back and think, maybe the best way to explain the horrors in lives around us and in the Middle East and elsewhere. It's horrible, is because there is a devil.
And what did the text expect? Like, is the apocalypse that it's talking about, this final battle, is it very similar to the Book of Revelation, or is it similar, but is it more different?
Both. There's no evidence that the author of Revelation quotes any of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but he is growing his tree in a garden that's been enriched by the ideas in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You're absolutely right. The war, the cosmic war, is reflected not only in Revelation, but in the Qumran war scroll, where you have the sons of light fighting the sons of darkness, and then the end of all time.
Can you tell us a bit about the story of hymn 22's irrigator of the garden?
The irrigator is the righteous teacher, and what he's doing is giving living water to the trees of life that are being planted by God through him and are now creating the new Eden, the return to Eden. And that makes sense of the Bible, because when God created in chapter 1 of Genesis, he saw everything that he created and he says, oh, that's good. And then later he saw it again. He says, oh, that's very good. Okay, either God is so dumb that he doesn't realize what's going to happen. Pretty soon, Adam and Eve are going to revolt from him. Pretty soon, you're going to have the Tower of Babel. This means God cannot see in the future? The answer is he sees eschatologically. When God said, behold, it is very good, he is seeing, according to the priest, how it will finally end. And then you hear people for thousands of years saying, how long? Oh Lord, how long? And think about the Jews gathering Friday evening in Auschwitz and Buchenwald and Dachau, praying, how long, oh Lord, how long? And then the GIs came, and most of them were too weak to survive. But even in Israel today, there are many that had been in these death camps, and that's what they were. Well, we have to come back and bring it, because God, according to the authors of Genesis, he saw what he created was good. God is not myopic, according to these priests. The priests are optimistic, and they are not only optimistic in hope, they are optimistic in reality. They are experiencing a God that will not fail them. And they would say to you, not yet, but how long do we have to wait? He definitely will correct everything. And remember, in Revelation, the last book in the New Testament, or the Bible, there is no temple in Jerusalem. Have you ever observed that?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah, that's very good. I think you did too. And that means, no, there's no need for a temple, because in that day, God will dwell with us. He will be with us. He will not be in a temple among us. You asked wonderful questions, and I hope many people in Texas and around there are finding what we're saying helpful. I'm not trying to be helpful. I'm trying to be as truthful as I can be. And I have been very fortunate to have spent all the time of my life since I was a little boy and thought, this is what I want to do. I want to understand what God is trying to communicate. Who is God? What is his will? And I've learned a lot. Now, I don't have all the answers, but I've learned how to ask better questions.
So my closing question: how long did it take for all the Thanksgiving hymns to be composed? Like, what time period is it? Uh,
I wish we could answer that. We have the 6 scrolls. So it was very important at Qumran. It was composed at Qumran or finally edited at Qumran. That's how I put it. The final edition was at Qumran. I would say about 100 years. But Jacob, I don't know how many hymns were written by the righteous teacher. I've come down to maybe I could say 6, but it's very complicated. If you can find only an autobiographical note that seems to be, it has to be an autobiographical note. How many poems have that? And it has to be tied in with a little bit we know about the righteous teacher. Well, if we know a little about him, there's a little bit that we can say. So we could move into subjectivity, but I don't want to do that. You're being communicated with people that have, as you know, for 2 years, I studied in Germany with the major scholars studying the scrolls, and I was twice a professor in Jerusalem. So I have spent a lot of time with Protestants, Lutherans, Christians, Jews, Samaritans. Samaritans are not interested in this that we're talking about, but they are very deeply interested in the Old Testament, and theirs is a little different. And I have found a scroll at Qumran that has the variant, which we call, it's in the Samaritan edition. So it doesn't mean the scroll we found is Samaritan. It means that they have used this scroll. Well, God bless you, and I hope everybody can find a way to feel that we're not alone, that God loves us, and the more we know about God, the more mysterious and awesome the unknown one becomes to each of us.
Well, thank you, Professor Charlesworth, for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Hello, viewers. Thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and/or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during your live stream. Thank you.